do have to make the distinction first and foremost that the purpose of this tournament isn't to find the best team in America. It's to be exciting and make money, and maybe not necessarily in that order. That being said, when you look at this Final Four, absolutely all of them deserve to be there. In order to reach the Final Four, you have to beat a team that was in the Sweet 16, beat a team in the Elite Eight, and it doesn't matter if you're Villanova, who's beaten teams by an average of 19 points per game, or Syracuse, who's beaten multiple double-digit seeds. The great thing about the tournament is there are no frauds in terms of champions. You have to overcome adversity. You have to beat other great teams. And for Syracuse to go past its naysayers and haters, they still have to beat two really good teams. And that's the way it is. But for the people who hated on Syracuse and said that they didn't deserve to be there, it's too late. You've lost. The Orange have already validated themselves. And I think it's sort of ironic how this Syracuse team has been villainized when you go back to the 1985 Villanova team that has been so romanticized and revered. And this is a very similar situation. And I don't think we'd hear any of this weak field or easiest trip to the Final Four if Michigan State traverses the same bracket and just play Syracuse and beat Syracuse along the way, as well as Gonzaga and then Virginia. I'd also want to touch on something that you mentioned, Luke. What happens when some of these marquee programs go out early? Is that good? Is that bad? I think it's excellent for teams like Michigan State, West Virginia, Cal to all be upset, because more than anything, I don't want to see frauds. Mm-hmm. And if you can't beat a team in the first round that's a double-digit seed, and yes, 10 double-digit seeds won, that's fantastic, but this year is a big blow for those big conference schools. We had a 10-11 matchup being Syracuse and Gonzaga, two basketball schools, and you look down the stretch, there were tons of great matchups. I'm sure the networks love to see Indiana and Kentucky, KU and Villanova, Duke and anybody. The tournament has been fantastic again, and the team at the end always leaves a good taste in your mouth because they won their last 6 games and they handled the pressure, the coverage, the competition, and adversity better than anyone else. This tournament has been fantastic. I've loved it all the way. And give Syracuse some credit. They deserve to be there as much as anyone else.
Well, in terms of now we have the playoffs, and does that devalue the regular season? I say absolutely not. And the question was, does it hurt revenue? Does it hurt ratings? From what I've seen, at least from week number 1, is the fact that the ratings are still up, and I think they'll stay that way because I think under this college football playoff, even teams with 1 losses now are playing essentially elimination games throughout the year. You can make it and you can win a national championship with 1 loss. Alabama did it. Ohio State did it in the last 2 years. Alabama lost in week 3 early in the season to Ole Miss and played a bunch of other ranked teams. Top 10 Texas A&M, top 10 Georgia, number 2 LSU, number 17 Mississippi State. All of those games were essentially elimination games for Alabama in the sense that if you have 2 losses, you're done. Under the system before, if you had a loss, if your record had a blemish on it, and there were 2 other teams in the entire country that were undefeated, like Ohio State, even in their conference a couple years ago where they only played 2 games against ranked teams, you're out of luck. This is a win-win because at the end of this, you have all the best teams with either 1 loss or no losses, and then they play each other. And you've got the top programs and a national champion that is worthy, that's beaten 2 of the best 4 teams in the country. And I just say this is fantastic for college football, in my opinion.
Send it over to Andy.
Chris Borland is a grown man. He's been playing football for 10 years now, but he's now part of this generation of football players that is informed about the consequences of playing at this high level for an extended period of time. And he made the decision, one he has every right to make, to choose his physical and mental well-being over monetary gain. Now, this issue isn't really about Chris Borland specifically. It's about players today being aware and not having an excuse of ignorance to not knowing what head trauma can do later in life. You look at the issue of culture and the 4,000 plus players who sued the NFL this past year because of head trauma. Far too often today, players don't report injuries, play through the pain. These tough guys, what do they have to prove once they're already established in the league? Now, in the NFL, you can play through a concussion. Players have played through the head trauma in the past, but really the results are a permanent compromise of mental skills. And $700 million wasn't enough to compensate these past players. Closer to $1 billion are going to be paid out by the NFL to the alums of this league. And you look at the different levels of payouts, dementia, more significant cases of dementia, Alzheimer's disease, ALS, death with ATE. You look at the poster boy for this, ATE, someone who was unquestionably heralded and revered as a tough guy, Junior Seau, passing away. Now, Chris Borland saw memory loss, confusion, impaired judgment, impulse control, aggression, depression. He saw all of these symptoms and he made his decision to step away from the lead. Good for him. Chris Gasper of the Boston Globe wrote that the NFL is now the tobacco of pro sports. It comes with a warning label for its participants. You need to heed that warning. Chris Borland, he made his choice. Good for him. You can cut bait with a player at any time. The player should be able to do the same.
But still,
I think it's fair for you to think that because of the results, but you have to look at the sample size, it only being 2 games. Coach Belichick had all summer to prepare for the Cardinals, and he knew he wouldn't have Tom Brady, and towards the end of it, he knew he wouldn't have Rob Gronkowski, and he crafted a game plan, and they were able to execute and get a win. Week 2, they beat a team that wasn't as good. And when I look back at Tom Brady and some of the players he's been with, he hasn't had too many offensive weapons. And by and large, those guys that he's performed with, I think of Deion Branch, who was really good with the Patriots, got a fat contract in Seattle, didn't perform and came back. I think of Randy Moss, who put up all-time numbers with Tom Brady. And then afterwards, he sort of went away and then his career was over. I think of Wes Welker, who wasn't as productive until he went to New England, and then he went to Peyton Manning, another all-time quarterback. I think Tom Brady has shown consistently over a decade that he can make his other offensive players better. Yes, I'll concede that Belichick's one of the best coaches of all time, but I think Brady is too. And I'd keep him as long as he wants to be there. But that's just me.
Disagree.